Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. My guest today is Tyler Freel. He's the writer for Outdoor Life and host of Tundra Talk podcast. Thanks for being on, man.
No, thanks for having me, man. Good to catch up with you again. I was glad it was nice to chat with you in person here when you were up in Fairbanks.
Yeah, I got to admit that when I was there underneath all the sheep that I see in your background right now, it was kind of intimidating.
Yeah, it's I don't know. If some people aren't used to all sort of eyes looking at them, then it could be a little different, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I just packed as many of them in here as I could get.
Yeah, they talk about, the people who are anti-hunters say, well, why do you need all that stuff? And it really is that memory. And one of the things that, like, you knew, like, details about each one, and if you just glance at them, they all look the same, but you know the difference between, like, this one was this age, and then this one was broomed, or it's broomed on one side, the double broom I got there, and then it was pretty sweet just to have that, the recollection of each one. And I have the same thing, with the antlers that I have for deer, man. They're just beautiful things, and they just represent those memories, and to have them out to look at, it just reminds you of why you do all that.
Oh yeah, big time. Like a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between any of them, but just having them there to look at it, I mean, it's a big reminder. I mean, just looking at them brings up all sort of memories from each individual hunt, and details that unfortunately they start to get fuzzy as years go by, and that having something tangible that can really, like, put you back into that moment. I mean, that's what it's all about. Is it's not really about a bragging type thing. It's most people that get animals mounted, it's a way to kind of relive those experiences over and over again and preserve memories.
Yeah. Even if it is a copy of a copy of a copy that ends up, like, your memory ends up being a little less sharp than the original, you do know that the original was cool in some way. So even if there is a little bit of embellishment, it's still legit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So when you're going into that, like, is there anything at all that ends up being kind of routine, or do you ever get an idea of, well, why do I still do this, or is it 100% fresh each time?
Yeah, it can be sort of routine. And some aspects of it, like I've tempered a little bit. Like the first few years, man, especially if I would get way more emotionally involved. I think in previous years, I'd get way more amped up. Now, I don't even get that excited about it till I start, like, getting into sheep country, and then it gets exciting. And, I used to, if I'd had rams spotted and put to bed, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And, you just wondering, and I don't know, maybe it's just experience knowing that, it's probably going to work out. And I know the routine, but every experience is a little bit different. And man, there's very few things that just get my heart pounding. Like when you crawl up over and you've got sheep right there and it's going to work out. And, yes, I mean, it's just each one's unique in its own way. There's a lot of similarities, but it's definitely enough that I haven't got sick of it yet.
Yeah, that's good. I think some of the biggest things that I think about, then I kind of worry about still, just the logistical issues. If I'm going to take my boat out somewhere, is the weather going to be good? And then are there going to be other people at the spot that I want to anchor? And so all those things kind of go into it. So my biggest, like, apprehension are those sort of things. But when it comes to getting on the mountain, then I'm totally relaxed. Do you get really worried or somewhat worried about, people being in the spot or logistical issues getting there? I know a lot of the stuff that you do, you've just scouted, and you don't do flyouts every year. So what's the most nerve-wracking thing other than getting on there?
It kind of depends on the spot. I know usually, especially if I'm going by myself, which I don't do a lot, but I have done several times, I get super anxious right up, like at the moment where it's time to take off, I mean, I feel like I'm going to throw up, and there's just
But
so
not
much stuff
diarrhea?
like that. Not diarrhea, not yet, anyway. Um, there's so much stuff going through my mind, wondering just all that stuff. In some spots, I get stressed out about certain obstacles that I'm going to have to encounter, whether it's with the four wheeler or, excuse me, or just, I mean, any number of obstacles. And like you said, yeah, what happens if there's people there when I get there? And um, anymore, I just try to take it as it comes. I try to compartmentalize it, and that's really sometimes what you have to do. I think when you get such a huge endeavor. I mean, there's some trips where just the entire, or even just riding four wheelers in, it's just super stressful because you're going to have to come back through here, and maybe the conditions are going to be different, or maybe the rivers are up if you have to do stream crossings, and you're just teetering on destroying your equipment, and there's all these what ifs, and you kind of just have to take one obstacle at a time and put it out of your head until it's time to deal with it again for the most part. I mean, that's how I cope with it anyway.
Yeah. So how does that compare to, we'll make it a little bit more time relevant, how does that excitement compare to your Spring Bear program that you got? You're probably not days away, but you're weeks away, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, weeks away. We'll see when the ice goes out. It's been getting really warm, so I would expect the ice is going to go out here. It's the 21st of May today. So I bet in a week to 10 days the ice is going to go, and then I'll usually give it another week or so after that to flush out, and then the boat's in the water and getting baits in. It is different, but it's a similar kind of excitement with bear baiting. You put so much work into it on the front end, preparation and kind of setting the stage and checking and when that bear you want to shoot. I usually I get excited when I first see a bear, and then when I decide it's a bear I'm going to shoot, then the heart really starts pumping, and it's time to start breathing and remind myself that it's just a bear and all that. And grizzlies are even worse, up because it just seems to take so much more time and effort and just repeat persistence to get good opportunities at them than black bears. But yeah, I love it. I mean, I love sitting in the woods at nighttime listening to the birds and just enjoying it after being cooped inside all winter.
Yeah. How long does it take to kind of get used to that? Because Prince of Wales doesn't have brown bears. Revilla might have some on the east side, but I just not encounter anything but black bears all the time. So how long does it take to kind of get used to being in grizzly bear territory, or do you ever really get totally comfortable? I know when you and your guys are talking about it, you become able to sleep, but do you ever feel 100% comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I get I try not to be anxious or worry too much unless there's a reason to be, and like for me, where we're at, there's a lot of bears, but it's going into bear baits that I know, for grizzlies frequent, that makes me a little nervous sometimes. Or if, it's not to say I'm not going to do it, but it just kind of, I try to heighten my awareness level and my anxiety level I want to have it be appropriate for the given situation. And I don't know, it doesn't, I just don't have, the excitement of hunting them and stuff is something you can learn to cope with a little bit. But so I think that varies from person to person too. Some guys can't ever get over buck fever, or don't. I mean, I still have to remind myself to breathe, and it's like the longer that bear's there, and I've got to look at him. The black bear I shot last year, I had to watch him for 20 minutes before he gave me a shot, and just having to breathe and calm myself down and remind myself it's just a bear. So yeah, I don't know. In some ways, you never get used to it, and if you totally do, to where where it doesn't get your heart pumping a little bit, then it's probably not exciting enough to be worth doing anymore.
Yeah. Jesse Knock took me out to where he shot that last Well, I'm sure he shot a couple. He shot a couple good bears, but the one he made that little film about a couple years ago. So I went out with him a couple weeks afterwards, and I just got to see that whole layout because I've never done bear baiting. I've just kind of the program of waiting out on the flats for something to come out and then shooting it. So just seeing where his setup was, and he's like, "Yeah, the bear was right there," and I'm like, "Dude, that's crazy." But there was at least like he had like an escape route. I was thinking, okay, escape route. If anything weird happens, like this is how he would get out. How does that differ when you're up there in the interior? Like, do you have? Because it all just seems kind of forested. What's the lay of the land like? How do you choose your spot, and then how do you access?
Yeah, it's I broke up there right at the end, but I think I got the gist of it. It's super forested where in all the places I hunt pretty much, you have zero visibility. I try and I tend to hunt. I've got a boat, so I tend to hunt river country, and it's pretty common. A lot of rivers in the interior, all sort of game travels up and down them, and there's kind of river corridors that a lot of game is concentrated in. And I'll try, I base where I'm picking baits off of a couple factors. Try to pay attention to prevailing winds and then also spots in the river where I think, I'll do a little like Google Earth scouting and spots, topographical features that I think will funnel critters into downwind and the prevailing wind to where, I think the best chance of them getting the scent and finding the bait's going to be, and that's a lot of the battle. And guys find it's not near as easy as you would think, just throwing a bait out and expecting there to be bears on it, especially, to be really productive. It takes a lot of time and some trial and error. I put baits in spots that I think would be just absolutely dynamite, and they never even get touched. And I don't know why, but yeah. And I tend to. I guess the other thing I look for, in the interior, I like putting baits in stands of big spruce. Us saying big timber is totally different than what you guys think of big timber. But up here where you got a lot of alder stuff and black spruce, and this is, it could just be my personal, everybody's got their own way of doing things, and it's just the things I look for. I like putting baits in stands of big spruce trees, because they're nice for tree stands, and it just seems like bears like that big dark timber with, brushy, real thick cover around it that they can feel comfortable in.
And how has that changed? Because you've shot a couple with a compound bow, right? But then you've become more primitive archery. Like, how has that changed your adjustment, or is it just the same thing? You just got to wait for them to get closer? Or like, how has that changed?
Yeah, I've never actually killed any big game animals with a compound.
You skipped right.
I had one. Yeah, well, I had one for a while, and just saw the UPS guy. And I just got bored with it, so I just found myself not shooting it that much. So I had switched to shooting a traditional bow about 10 years ago, and started and killed my first big game animal with a bow with that. And so I've just kind of stuck with that, and it's been a lot of fun. And I've been shooting recurves and modern recurves for a while, and the whole stone. I killed a couple bears with stone arrowheads. That was kind of cool. I kind of pick these weird, what would you call them? Just weird goals, kind of off the cuff goals that seem totally random, and so something gets stuck in my brain, and then I just have to do it, even if it doesn't make any logical sense. Like shooting one with shooting grizzly bear with a muzzle loader. My wife's like, I understand the traditional archery thing, but why would you just want to take a crappy old gun?
Yeah.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Well, think about the traditional archery. That's pretty cool because it puts a lot of extra work in there, and it's not just like a showman type thing. Like you put a lot of time into that, and you do your shot of the day. When you do your shot of the day, is it literally like one shot, like you're putting everything into it, make sure you're doing it right, or do you do a couple of shots each day?
No, I shoot quite a bit each day, or I try to. Even in the winter, if it's just in my garage, and I'll just take I record a lot of my shots to kind of fine tune whatever I'm working on, see what I'm doing. I find it to be pretty helpful form wise. And so I'll just take one of those shots from during the day and post it as like the shot of the day. It's a little corny, but I've gotten the habit of it. And it's been cool because I've saved a bunch of them on like Instagram highlights so I can see my progress. And sometimes if I'm having trouble, like earlier this winter, I was having, I can't remember what was going on, but things weren't feeling right. And I went back, to a different time I could see, and I started comparing the differences to kind of diagnose what I was doing. So I don't know, it's half hobby, but I like doing it.
Yeah.
So, and it helps try to keep me accountable. I try to post one most of the time, so it keeps me shooting my bow and staying on that. Because if I don't do it, I'll lose it.
Yeah, I talked to a couple buddies, and they said that like, try that one shot a day thing. That way you don't get used to the first shot's your throwaway, and by the time you get to 5 or 6 or 7, then you're kind of honing it in. When you're out hunting, you're hoping for one shot, and you probably won't get any more than one. So I was like, that's a pretty good principle. So I've kind of gone back and forth between just shooting a ton each day, but then also kind of putting that pressure on myself where you're getting exactly this one shot. You got to make it count. All right, we're back. I'll admit to the little we had a little delay. My internet went out, which happens very infrequently, just whenever I really need it to work, I guess. Yeah. And then, so you were checking your smoker. What do you got in the smoker? You said you got some bear?
Yeah, I made today I smoked up about 40 pounds of bear snack sticks. And so I'm trying to clean out all the bear meat I put in there for that purpose last spring before I hopefully start shooting some bears this spring.
Yeah. Is that how you do most of it? I'm just going off on bear cooking stuff now because I have no idea where we stopped a couple of minutes ago. There's no finding that thread.
Yeah, no kidding. That's my my favorite way of doing it. It just bear meat's lends itself to being really good for sausage, and I'm a little paranoid of catching the trichinosis, so I want to make sure everything's real well cooked, and once you smoke it and temp check it and all that, like it's done. You don't have to worry about it, and it makes really good sausage. So I'm planning on making some summer sausage, but I really like those kind of smaller diameter snack stick, a little bit bigger than the Slim Jim type of things. I found they're pretty easy to make. I just buy the kits for them, and they'll do like 20 pounds a kit. And they're really good. My kids love them, so we just destroy them when we have them. So I shot 3 black bears last year and just saved all that and deboned it and packed it and kind of chunked it and packed it in gallon bags and put it in the freezer. And so whenever I want to make a batch, I just weigh out what I need and go from there.
What kind of like stuffing program do you have? Do you have one of those like hand crank things? Did you have an attachment on your grinder, or how does that work?
Yeah, I've got both. I started out, I had got a grinder used from someone that, I mean, I knew that they probably only used it half a dozen times or so, and it's one of the old Cabela's, like 3/4 horse grinders, and it has a stuffer attachment. Although, I try for burger, moose burger, anything burger, I like using the plastic tubes that you stuff it in. It just seems like they pack well and they thaw out nice, rather than vac sealing them. Although I'll do that too, but the only that it has several different size stuffing tubes, but the only one that really works well is the smallest diameter one with a little auger that helps pump it out. Otherwise, you just gotta freaking jam it through there, and it's difficult, or I found it to be difficult. So for larger sausage, like summer sausage and brats and stuff like that, I bought one of those LEM, just the 5-pound, crank ones, and that seems to work really well for that. I still use, and I think the smallest attachment for that hand crank one won't quite fit the small, whatever diameter they are, the sausage stick casings, and I've heard from guys that those hand crank ones can be pretty difficult sometimes when you mix cured sausage, like the sausage sticks or summer sausage, because the meat. Part of the cure is acts as a binder and starts making everything super sticky and almost solidifies it. But that auger on my grinder does a good job of like pumping it through. You still have to stuff it like mad, but it will pump it through and give you a nice consistent fill.
And then how do you check the temperature? That was one of my problems when I was doing those caribou sticks. Is I had to rig my own little stuffer because I didn't have the I couldn't find the attachment on my grinder. Yeah. So I cut out the corner of a vacuum seal bag and then cut off the bottom of a funnel and was just pushing it through there, and it was awful. I didn't feel smart at all. But then when I put it in the oven, I don't have a smoker. Every time I checked, it didn't seem like it was up to temperature. And by the time it was, it seemed like it was pretty. I don't know. It's supposed to be kind of dry, but what point do you know, or how do you check the temperature to make sure it gets up above where it needs to be?
Yeah, I've got a grill smoker. It's a Camp Chef one that you can. I think the only difference between those and like all the Traegers and all that stuff that everybody's all about is that this one you can pull back a cover and you can get like direct flame on to grill stuff, flame grill stuff if you want. But it actually has like temperature probe attachments, and I think there's different. There's a lot of different stuff out there that, for meat temp check and stuff, and for me, smoking, like, it's been a learning curve, and I'm still kind of a novice at it. But it seems like stuff really, and there's an art to it, and cooking sausages and stuff like that, so you can get it up to temperature, but you don't want to get it up to temperature too fast, or it can get dried out. And as the closer you get to that temperature that you want, the slower it's going to be, because you're trying to like not have your air be, or your smoke be too hot. Yeah, it's a learning curve for sure, but I'm enjoying doing it, and that's how long story short, that's how I do it. I cheat. I got a temperature probe that I can plug right into my grill.
That's perfect.
And show me and keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and my first batch was fine. It was dry. It wasn't great, but at least it was something that I could eat. It wasn't absolutely catastrophically ruined to the point where, it was inedible. So it was nice that the starting point was good enough to eat, but definitely have a long way to go with that. Yeah,
no, and that's part of the journey. I mean, I really got to like build a big smoker, and it'd be nice for doing this sausage, have a big stand-up smoker that you can hang stuff in, and I think you would get a little bit more even thing with that grill. It's a awesome tool, but it's not perfect either. These sausage sticks, I've kind of got the whole like casing, sometimes coiled or just woven back and forth across the grate, and the stuff that's on the outside tends to I'll usually burn a little bit of it. It'll get a little bit too hot and too dry because the heat's coming up around the outside. So it's not perfect, but and ideally one of these days I could build a nice little smoker, especially if I was doing a lot of fish or a lot of sausage. It would be really handy.
Yeah, some of the people back on Prince of Wales, they have some smokers just built perfectly, exactly what they wanted to the size they wanted. And they just got it so dialed in, and you're just pretty jealous, and it makes you just want to. Why don't you give me some, and then I don't have to go through all the trouble. But at some point, like, no, I need to figure out how to do this because it'd be nice to not have to rely on other people.
Yeah, and I think if a guy's willing to do the research, you could find ways to make a pretty affordable, good, like, heavy duty smoker, especially living down where you do, with the access to all the fish and stuff like that. There's a lot of that. A lot of that stuff's really good smoked. I mean, everyone likes smoked salmon, but some of the best smoked fish I ever have. Do you guys have those black bass, those black rockfish down there? Those are phenomenal smoked too.
They're kind of underrated. It was until the last couple of years, when halibut population is a little bit down, that guides really started targeting those because you're getting a really great whitefish that a lot of people like for tacos, for smoked, for anything, and it's that's definitely been great.
Yeah, and they're small and they're easy to catch, so you don't get a ton of meat off of them. But I think they're as good as any fish I've ever eaten. Those ones. I think they're highly underrated.
Well, you don't have to worry about if you catch a really big one, it's still going to taste good. You catch some of those really huge halibut. It's cool. It's a great picture, but then you have this really fat chunk of fillet that can be difficult to manage, to handle, and the texture is a little bit off. Same thing with a lingcod. But those things, it's a very consistent taste, and you can catch quite a few of them. They're pretty easy to find. They don't make for a great picture, but if you're out there to get food, then that's what it's about.
Yeah, well, especially compared to stuff like yellow eye. I mean, that stuff's really good, but there's, all over the state, a lot of those rockfish regs have tightened down, it seems like. I don't follow it too close, but, it seems like it's really tightened down in areas, and I don't know that that's really affect those black rockfish regs very much. And it seems like they were always easy to find.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about it. Like, there's some of the local spots have been pretty fished out once everybody kind of went to that. But it's weird. It makes you wish that we kind of knew exactly what was going on, and that's kind of the thing. People want to try certain things, or just regulate certain things. It's just weird. It's tough to know what's going on. It's got to be just a combination of a lot of different things, and so to point the finger in one direction is pretty crazy. And, we saw that last week with the articles were circulating about up north and the closure of those areas. You want to blame not being able to get easy caribou on the fact that there's non-locals hunting it, but that's probably not the real issue, but.
Yeah, well, and that's, and I just actually earlier this morning had Larry Bartlett over and did a podcast with him because he's a lot more invested in that area and educated on the issues of that area than I am, and it's, you're going to get a different take from everybody, but, there's anecdotes of like that the caribou don't even typically show up in a lot of those areas until later, historically anyway. It's I think just humans' natural tendency is, if I was in the situation and you get a few good years where caribou are all over the place early, and then something changes, you're going to look for something to blame, because it was nice, and you're going to look for a cause when sometimes you can find the cause and sometimes they just do what they, critters and things happen because they happen. There's no explanation that you can control or have an effect on,
Yeah. That local point of view is so important because you have the opportunity to observe things and tendencies. And if you've been there longer than about 5-10 years, you can see cycles. And if you've taken notes and you have some observations, then you can be a really good, provide really good insight. But also you can have that bias that, you start pointing fingers rather than just let's really look at what was going on. I was just looking at steelhead right now because that's what kind of the big thing is for April. And 4 years ago, it was super, super nice and warm. And I'd only been in Ketchikan 3 years at that point. And so I figured, okay, this is the first week of April is the time to get the steelhead because the water is up a little bit. It's warmer. And I had these pictures in the background. You had some budding leaves, but that ended up being like the norm was cold, and that ended up being kind of a an anomaly that it was that it was that warm, and the natural cycle went back, and it's more like a mid to late April where it started to get warmer, and you get the buds on the trees and on the bushes and things like that. So what I thought was the norm ended up being the exception to the rule, and so you can kind of trick yourself too into making assumptions about the way things are when it's really not the case.
Yeah. No, and that issue up there, man, it's a complex one, but it's pretty scary, the prospect that they could close off all that stuff, and then they have done. There's been similar stuff happen, and it's just kind of a cyclical effort to keep non-residents out, or not just non-residents but non-locals. And it's unfortunate. You don't want to throw anybody under the bus because I can sympathize or empathize with the local perspective too. But at the same time, you gotta be fair. And if what they're claiming to be going on isn't actually going on, there's no reason to shut it down for everybody.
Yeah, I'm all for people in a certain area having first shot at things. That just seems reasonable because you live there. But if it is attempting to turn public land into private just because you want it to be easier, then that's just second article that you wrote last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, I don't know which week it was. We were talking about how we put ourselves into different categories. Subsistence versus sport versus trophy. Do you think it's kind of the chicken and the egg? Did we do that, or was that who put us in the categories? Was that our doing, or was that how did that happen?
I don't know exactly, and a lot of that that whole Anilka deal was a lot of it was to protect the interest of people who traditionally are subsistence hunters and subsist off that stuff. And I guess naturally you have to define what a subsistence hunter is, and they do it by location essentially, which kind of sucks because there's people in a lot of quote unquote non-rural areas that eat a ton of wild game, and you or me, maybe we may be able to, we have a store available. We can go down and buy food if we need to, but we prefer to, source our wild meat and fish, rather than buy it. But, what point do you make that argument? Because basically any community that's connected, it's not like people are going to starve to death. There's ways to get food. They may not be easy or optimal. And I'm not saying in any way that people shouldn't be able to live as much of a subsistence lifestyle as they can, but it's kind of where do you draw the line? And I know a lot of, it's irritating. I'd like to go, spring waterfowl hunting sometimes. If I lived 50 miles down the road, I would be able to, but I can't. And part of that's a choice too, but at the same time, there's a little bit of arbitrary or I don't know if arbitrariness is an actual word. Maybe you could tell me that, but it's kind of the some of the part of these qualifications are somewhat arbitrary, and stuff like this closure. It's irritating, even though I don't have any plans to go up there hunting because it's all of our land. To be all cliche about it, it's all of our land, and if the regulations are specifically targeted to keep non-residents out. And there's even current state regulations in certain rural areas that are, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the way things are done are to, limit non-local participation, and kind of it is what it is. You can like it or you don't like it. But I think I found it with that article. I found it interesting, this whole contemporary like movement to be the food hunter, and that's the cool thing, and and that's how we sell hunting, and I get that, but hunting is also about a hell of a lot more than just the food to any hunter, even if that is like that's one of the biggest motivations for any person that enjoys hunting. It's not just about the food, and that it's a important component of it. But when you make that the sole motivator, or the sole goal of it, then it diminishes hunting, I think, too.
We have a lot of lines that are readily accessible to us that are the right things to say in those moments. And I've been guilty of that too, where you just think, oh, it's not even about the hunt. And you think, wait, no, it is about that. Because if it wasn't, then I wouldn't be here right now. And you see those on some of the content when people go out hunting somewhere and they're up in the mountains. They're like, it's not even about the hunting. It's about getting up to the mountains. It's like, well, you're not doing this in June, right? You're doing this now because there's something to hunt. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I saw this in the pandemic a couple times where, students during the weekends were going out hunting, and it was just that. I mean, is there a better, more healthy thing, productive, purposeful thing for kids to be doing than going out hunting during the pandemic? It was, we didn't have school on Friday when we were at 50% capacity, and so some of my students were like, well, I'm not going to show up to office hours. I'm going to go hunting. Thinking, that's great. That's a great use of time, because you're outside, you're getting your exercise, you're appreciating nature, you're bringing home food, like the whole experience. I mean, those rites of passage type things are so important for the development of people, and that's why we have so many people who, are lost because they don't have anything else, and so they get caught up in it's not really a purpose. It's more of like a distraction, or like some political fandom or something, and it's not anything that gives them any feeling of self-worth or anything that's challenging. And it's hard to really describe why we do what we do. People are going to take one word and just flip it however they want. So
well, and it also depends on people's worldview and in the lens that they look at things through. You can only control so much of what you present, and it's good to present hunting in a positive light, but you can't lie to people either. And you can only do the best you can. And some people just aren't. You can tell them something 50 ways to Sunday, and they just might not understand because of the lens they view the world through. They're not catching what you're pitching type of deal. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but I've seen there is a real kind of effort to split trophy hunters from food hunter at all sorts of different levels. Some I think is intentional to that divide and conquer type deal. But it's concerning when people just try to singularly define themselves as a hunter is basically one factor or one thing that makes them a hunter. Like it's just the food. Well, it's not just about the food. And if you're telling people that, then you're lying to them. and even the discouraging of what some people would call trophy hunting. Heard on a recent podcast, after explaining, I wrote this in that article, after explaining how you measure a bear skull, how people like quantify how you measure a bear skull to get the number that people quantify, and and now you've reduced that animal to a number, which that's not what goes on. It goes on to, well, you'd be better off in the kitchen, which I agree, go eat that stuff and share the meat and tell the people about it and all that, but because you might be interested in harvesting a big mature animal doesn't mean that you aren't interested in all this other stuff too, or that all this other stuff isn't important to you too. It's a complex thing, and it just, I don't know, it always irks me when this division gets sown and you kind of force people to pick a camp, so to speak, when we're all basically out there doing this stuff for the same reasons.
Yeah, the semantics end up being the huge point, and it's like that person says, "Well, you've reduced the bear to just a number." Well, no, you did, because your interpretation of everything that I said ended up being filtered in your way. Because you voluntarily, like, you're a writer and a podcaster, so that's double the opportunity at least for people to twist the words, take things the wrong way, and invite criticism. So how are you worried about that at all? Is it just something that you can shrug off now, or do you still get stuff that just makes you think, dude, what the heck?
No, I still get irritated sometimes, but for the most part, like, no, I don't know. Most stuff doesn't bother me, and the stuff that does get the flack I do catch sometimes. Most of it's not. It's like so ridiculous that it's not even worth addressing. If I say something stupid or write something stupid, or someone has has a rebuttal or is willing to tell me why I'm wrong, and I can see that, like, I like to think, I mean, maybe everyone does, but I like to think I can admit when I'm wrong, and maybe if I say something I shouldn't have said, or something was taken out of context or the wrong way, I'm willing to accept some criticism and work with that. It's just the stuff that's kind of off the cuff ridiculous that makes me roll my eyes a little bit. But I've had to grow pretty thick skin, and Frankly, my podcast, I'm surprised it doesn't get more flack, because it's a little bit rough around the edges, I would say. Some of the stuff that there's been a couple, a little bit of feedback that I just kind of, I didn't really know what to make of it or what exactly people were talking about, but yeah, I don't know. But I am a little surprised I don't get a little more negative feedback, because you can never keep everybody happy, and when you're do stuff a little rough around the edges, then that can sometimes get people riled up a little bit.
I think with writing, and I do the same thing with my columns, knowing that people could take it the wrong way definitely helps me with my diligence to think,
yeah,
all right, I want to make sure I word this correctly. So not to please anybody and not to self-censor or anything like that, but let's make sure that I do my diligence and make sure that I word this correctly so that a person who's reasonable might not misinterpret this. So I think it's a good challenge as a writer. But with the podcast, it is funny because you think you said something, but maybe something else is what's presented. But I'm not sure if a lot of people are spending an extra hour out of their day to listen through everything to find that one line to take out of context. But
yeah, no, and it's funny you mention that, and that's one thing I like about writing, and I struggle with podcasting. I feel like I've improved, and doing a podcast has helped me improve both my conversation skills in general. I'm still not all that articulate. I've learned on my podcast, and my wife's told me, is she used to tell me, you need to, you just talk too much and you monopolize the conversation. And so that's like been a good reminder to me to just like shut up and try to talk when I need to talk, but I feel like I've improved in that way. Maybe I haven't that much, but it's one thing I enjoy about writing is I can take the time. I mean, I'm a little slow between the ears most of the time. I'm the guy that, like, 3 days after a conversation comes up with the zinger that would have been perfect in the moment. So writing articles, and I've been doing it for quite a few years, so it's just a matter of repetition and practice. I feel I kind of agree with you. There's what I'm getting at. It lets me really analyze what I'm trying to say, like the point I'm trying to get across, and what words do I need to use to say it in as clear and articulate a way as I can.
I think with the podcast thing, you're listening to other podcasts, you can kind of break down what you like about it, not just like someone said something that was funny and I laughed. It's like, well, what about this podcast was good? And it's kind of interesting to look at that. And there's some podcasts that are kind of a Q&A that are great, some that are terrible.
Yeah.
Some solo podcasts that are awful and some that are great, and then some long podcast, but there's always some sort of takeaway, and it's always interesting. One of the things I like about your podcast is it's not just guys talking. Like, there's a lot of insight and a lot of information you can glean from it. It's not just a whole bunch of you had to be there type stories, and so that's I don't know if that's an intentional type thing, but it's an organic but educational type round table, if you will. So that's pretty sweet. So it's nice to have podcasts that, it's not just I'm daring you to listen to it because it's just a bunch of crap for 2 hours. It's but.
No, that's somewhat intentional. I don't know if that's, obviously I had no idea what I was doing starting out with it, and no idea what I wanted my podcast to be. So just kind of started. It actually have probably loosened up over the time that I've been doing it. On, like, a lot of times there's no script or plan. If there's certain things I want to talk about, I'll have them written down. If I'm like talking to, like a one-on-one podcast with someone that I don't know real well or whatever, I'm not real good at pulling stories. At pulling stories from people, and everyone's different too, and that's what's so fun about talking to different people is, some people you got to work to, like, get them to tell these awesome stories they have, and some people it's just natural, and I can just say, hey, how's it going, and then they and shut my mouth and let them talk. And but yeah, especially when it's all of us just shooting the breeze together, it is an effort to provide some useful information as well. I mean, if people can enjoy just the conversation, but we can also provide useful stuff, or whether it's a piece of gear we've been using or a technique or something like that, that's what I would like it to be anyway.
There's always those people that you either see at the store or or at the marina or something like that, where a group of 3 or 4 people are just waiting to one up each other about stories, and it's just like this sort of, oh man, it's all you're not listening at all. This is just you can't wait to talk to one up someone else, and so I think you got a good bunch of guys, and I like to have people on my podcast too, that it's not just going to be about a 45-minute ego stroke. I'm not sure that's super beneficial to any sort of readers, and if you go in just for that, same thing with writing, if you're just going out there to write to tell everybody how great you are, then I don't think that's the route that you want to do. So budding writers or budding podcasters, not that we're Joe Rogan, but I think that's an important thing. That's what I like to listen to, and that's what I like to read. And I think that's the biggest thing, is finding things that you like, and then you can kind of use that as an example or something.
Yeah, and people that just like sharing the experiences, just like writing, just similar to writing. That's why I like writing, and I particularly like writing stories, stuff that, the hunts and stuff like that I've been on, because it helps me relive it. And I like telling it because I can relive it, but it also shares that experience. And then, usually, and those are some of my favorite ones where, we're fresh off a hunt or something, and we go down get to relive all sorts of different details. There's stuff, I think about hunts I did a long time ago that there's no, I didn't write anything down about them. And, a lot of that nuance and details kind of lost, it's gone. I can remember a lot of the basics, but it's tough to remember that. So it's fun to be able to share that, and like really, you let people know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, as well as more technical, like information that people can use.
Some of my first outdoor columns, I would spend it's just a chronological thing. So by the time it got to even us getting to the river, I was already like 500 words in. I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm like, this is pretty terrible. This column actually sucks. So it's kind of focused on, okay, what's the main point? What details do I need? What details do I need to leave out because they're not important to it? And as a reader, you pick up certain things and you latch onto certain things. And if something ends up not being important, it just ends up being confusing. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I've grown in riding, and it helps kind of consolidate the memory a little bit, I think. So it's just those needed details that you keep going forward.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's interesting, story like reading writing that I did a long time ago because I'm in no way, shape, or form a professionally trained writer. It's been kind of a lot of reading other writers, so I feel like I've developed my own style of writing, but maybe it's just like copied bits and pieces from other stuff. Like a lot of stories, you'll do the and it's kind of common in a lot of stories. You start with a like in the pre-climax, like key to the moment type thing, or pull from a certain experience and then step back and go through it. That's old as dirt, but it does seem to work. And I try, I like the structure of it, or visualizing a structure, how I want a piece to look when I'm writing it. I mean, this is all just like boring details, but I don't get to geek out about it very often. And if I knew growing up that I'd be geeking out about writing stuff, then I don't know what I would have done. But
yeah,
here I am.
Yeah, it's fun to look back at that though, and just have something else that's going on. Yeah, just fun to have that voice. But
Yeah.
So back to, I want to finish up. I think I remembered a couple of the questions I had about the bear program. I saw that you had when I was up at your place a couple grizzly bears that were hanging. Do you have any like full mounts or shoulder mounts, or what do you do with most of the hides?
No, I have I have a rug that I got made off a brown bear I killed on the peninsula. It's about a 9.5 foot bear. I have a couple bear rugs at my uncle's place. I don't have room for them currently, but I have one, the biggest interior grizzly I've ever killed. My taxidermist has him. We've been talking about doing a life-size mount of him for years. I don't know where I'd put it, but maybe I'll elect to do just a half body, or maybe I'll go get it. But it was a huge bear. He was like, I'm such a trophy hunter that he was like number 6 in the Pope and Young when I killed him. And he just had a really nice hide too. He had one tiny little rub above his tail, and that time of year it can be kind of tough to find bears, especially big bears that aren't all rubbed up and stuff like that. So I think I'll have a mount made out of him one way or another. I probably should, just to do him justice. The rest of my grizzlies, for the most part, I just get them tanned and like having them hang. And most of them have rubs here or there, and I kind of get some people it doesn't bother. I handled a lot of fur, did a lot of fur skinning, so I became pretty much an expert at finding damage and seeing different. And I've taxidermy prepped a ton of bears, so I have gotten pretty picky about as far as bears I would do something with. I still love hunting them, and I still look for mature bears and stuff like that, good bears to take that are, probably as far as grizzly bears that are out there killing moose calves. But no, I mean, as far as me, like I'll taxidermy prep them and put them up and get them tanned. But how many grizzly bear mounts does a guy need?
Yeah. Well, as far as skinning and things like that, like what, is there like a particular knife or technique or any sort of thing that you've learned that's been that's pretty beneficial? Like I've only done 2, and the first one I used like a regular hunting knife. The other time was more of a narrow. There's a little one of those Havalon with replacement blades. Is there anything that's really worked for you?
Yeah, I've got to go through a few knives. As far as just in the field knife. Most of the time when I'm bear hunting, I'm not too far from my boat, so I can carry more stuff. I can carry a couple knives. And sheep hunting and backpack hunting, I've been the past few years carry a Havalon and a fixed blade, like a Benchmade Altitude, like one of those real bare bones. And there's in recent years quite a few good, like either replaceable blade or fixed blade knives that are just ultralight and really good. I'll do most of the skinning and rough work with a fixed blade knife, and then the fine detail caping and stuff like that with a Havalon, just because it's just really hard to beat in the field, to beat those razor knives for real detail work. When I get stuff back to the shop, and I'm actually like taxidermy prepping hides or skin and fur, wolves, cats, stuff like that, I like to use they're just a cheap Victorinox paring knives. You see them a lot on fishing boats and stuff. You see the serrated ones on fishing boats, but just the non-serrated, like 3.5-inch paring knife. And last time I bought some, they were like $6 or $7 a piece. They're cheap knives, but if you get good at sharpening knives, you get either like a 3-sided jewel stick, or a good ceramic and a steel. You can keep those things really sharp, and they've got a nice flexible blade that's pretty. You're not going to break the blades. They're a pretty tough blade, but they're flexible, and they're really light knife. You can control them really well. Like on a lot of detail work, I'll hold the blade kind of like a pencil between my index finger and thumb, and just you can have really, really tight control, as opposed to if you're back here on the handle on a big hunting knife trying to work on something that's 4 inches away from your hand. Some guys use like X-Acto knives or utility knives. Same kind of principle, just boils down to what your taste. But I started using those a long time ago as my taxidermist. He taught me, basically everything I know about taxidermy prep and stuff like that. I worked halfway as an indentured servant to him for a while, but those knives, and for skin and feet, like on bears, it's pretty common in the field to when you're skinning them, it's the fastest way is to make all your cuts and skin them, and then knock the feet off and leave the feet in the hide at the ankle joint. You don't need to saw them or nothing. You just cut the tendons, break the joints, and then you can pack the hide out and deal with it at home. And so whether it's bear feet or wolf feet, I like to partially skin the foot and then hang it up I take a big halibut hook and grind the barb off and hang it by some cord from my skinning hook or winch or whatever, and hook that into the foot, and then you use the weight of the hide pulling on there to make skinning the foot a lot easier. And it takes practice, but I've skinned hundreds and hundreds of wolf feet, and I have yet to find a better way to do it. That's one trick. And then he also taught me how to use how to make my own and use ulus for fleshing. And I don't use them exclusively. I went for like a year. I did everything with the ulu just to really learn it well. And for fur stuff and some animals, I find it beneficial to use a big draw knife. Fur bearers, wolves, and cats and stuff like that, I like using a dull side and actually pushing the flesh off. Whereas if you get a big fatty prime bear, like early spring or late fall, where the hide's nice and thick and they got a bunch of fat, you can use just a razor. I get like a razor sharp, shaving sharp edge on the sharp side of that draw knife, and literally use on the flesh and beam, shave that stuff off. And it's basically like I do it in a similar way, like using a big ulu. It just gives you a lot more leverage and ability to cover territory on your flesh and beam. But the biggest thing, I always use I have a tiny little ulu I made, and I use that for doing the faces and fleshing the faces on everything, because I have a lot of control with that, and I can not, where's a big draw knife or a big ulu, you can ding holes in eyes and sensitive parts, stuff like that. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's a few things that I've learned over the years that have really helped me out.
No, that's great. Yeah, that actually the follow-up questions I have to that you addressed, so that was perfect. That's got after it.
Oh, nice, yeah, and having a good flesh and beam, man, having a good, I don't know, stuff like dealing with stuff like bears and big game. You can do it without a flesh and beam, but if you're not going to want to do very much of it, it's just so much. In doing that stuff, it takes time. The only way to learn it is to do it. I told a buddy that caught some wolverines this winter and telling me, man, are these things just a horrible pain in the butt, or am I, and I said, well, yep, that's the only, you just got to do it, man. That's the only way you really can learn as hands-on to get the feel for it. But yeah, and that's the other thing. Just even having a good flesh and beam for big critters. I just made one out of a washed up, a log I cut out of a tangle of just drift logs on a on a sandbar, and cut it in half and shaped it. And fur critters, I like using a PVC board because their skin's a lot thinner, and that wood doesn't. The imperfections in the wood make it a little, and it's a little bit softer, and the imperfections in the wood surface don't quite give me quite as a clean and smooth a bite, fleshing them, if that makes sense. You can I'll be careful. You got to steer me out because I'll just dive way down the rabbit hole of that.
No, that's good. You're finding that wheelhouse. That's just a lot of knowledge, and a lot of those things that you learn about that it gets filed away somewhere, and then later on it comes to mind and think, oh, that's what they meant. That's what they meant about that. So,
yeah,
that's good. Well, I kept you for a little over an hour since we had all those technical difficulties. So you got any sort of closing thoughts or anything?
I don't know, man. I guess I would just tell. I don't know when you'll have this one posted, but I think it's important people call into that meeting for the caribou. That caribou closure, potential closure, and let them know what you think about that. I think you only have control over so much, and you can only do what you do. But I think there's been a lot of people made aware of these issues that have been brewing up there for years and years. So that's nice. I don't normally give a bunch of pitches for stuff, but that's a pretty important one. And yeah, man, I'm just looking forward to spring and looking forward to see what you get into this spring. And appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I'm glad I was able to be on yours when we're up there and just see that Fairbanks program. You hear about stuff, so you go up there and get to see kind of the local view of it. Rather than go up, stay in a hotel, something like that. It's nice to kind of have a different idea about what Alaska is and see that inside. And it'll be hopefully have some good stuff, some good stories to tell, and have a bunch of questions about how to smoke, prepare some sausage sticks, man, because I love those. Those things are so great. Get a whole bunch.
They're like cocaine.
Yeah, it's so good.
Not that I would know.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, man. Well, thanks for being on here. Really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, sounds good.